In this session we will be looking at data types and data values and how they're stored by computer programming languages and computers. In particular, again, we'll be focusing on Visual Basic and Just Basic in our examples, although I may make reference to other programming languages as the tutorial continues. So programs work with data, and data is or are items of or pieces of information. Information is actually data that has been processed and means something. So data, if you like, are the subcomponents of information, and data can consist of lots of different types of values. So every value has to have a type in computing so that the computer knows how to deal with it. And values occur all over the place in computer programming, so we need to know how to use them. So values can be returned from functions that do something for us. Values are stored in pieces of memory in programming called variables, and we'll deal with variables in the next session. And values also occur, if you like, at several stages during the calculation of an expression. So x equals 2y plus z, for example, would result in several different values being generated at various different points. So the type of data that a value has determines several things. It determines what sort of value it represents, whether it's textual information made up of characters, so A, B, C, underscores, minus signs, also digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whether it's numeric, and numbers can be lots of different types. There can be integer values, whole numbers, or they could be fractional numbers, what's known as floating point numbers, which are generally in computing terms referred to as either single or double precision floating point numbers. Variables could also be of the type string. A string is a sequence of characters that generally could make up a word or a sentence, for example. So there's lots of different types of data. Those data types I've just gone through there are what's known as atomic data types, the simplest data types that most programming languages would deal with. There are also complicated or more complex data types which more advanced programming languages deal with. Things like dates, which could be represented in many different ways and many different formats. So the type of a data also has a bearing on the range of possible values that can be stored in that particular data item. And for example, with integer values, we can have integers expressed as either short integers or long integers. We could even use something called a byte to represent integer values, which is much smaller. And this type of data, along with the sort of range, if you like, is then influences how many bytes of computer memory are used to store the value. We'll deal with bytes and bits in a separate session, which is one of the supporting sessions of this material. So if you don't understand bits and bytes, then you need to dig out the session on bits and bytes, and you'll understand there a bit more about these values and how they are stored in computer memory. So this table is a representation of the various data types, or some of the data types that are commonly used in VB and other programming languages. A representation of what type of data is stored by that data type, and also how much memory is required. So for example, there's a data type called Boolean. Boolean is commonly used for representing the status of things within a program for controlling purposes, and it has a logical value which is true or false. And in VB it takes up 2 bytes of memory. You can declare a data item of type byte. A byte has a value 0 through to 255, and again, if you've followed the session on bits and bytes, you'll understand why it's 0 to 255. If you don't understand why it's 0 to 255, then you need to go through that supporting session again. So a byte obviously takes up 1 byte of memory. We can then have a character. Now this is where it starts to differ. In some older programming languages, a character was synonymous with a byte, and it took up 1 byte of memory. More modern programming languages have sort of built-in support for multiple languages, as in spoken and written languages, and therefore a character of written text, if you like, A, B and C that we're familiar with, takes up 2 bytes, 1 byte for the actual character itself and then another byte to represent the character code. So for us it's a UK type code. Again, I'm not going to go into the specifics of what the Unicodes are here, that's another session. There are then more complicated data types, things like date and time information, which takes 8 bytes, which is quite a large amount of memory. Given that each byte has 8 bits, that's actually 64 bits. So if you're working with a 32-bit computer, then a data type can't actually be stored or manipulated in 1 processing cycle. It has to work in 2. If you're using a 64-bit computer, then it can actually be processed in a single cycle of execution. Decimal values are a fixed point number, and that's 16 bytes long in VB. So these allow you to store very, very large or very, very small numbers at a high degree of accuracy. However, they are very, very inefficient to work with, so they should only be used when you actually need to. There are lots of others. The ones that we'll mainly be coming across will be integers, and will normally work with either short integers or just integer values, and also we'll come across singles and strings, and I'll go into a bit more detail on these data types as and when it's appropriate.